Thelema, Coast to Coast, Show 39, February 13th, 2007. Do what thou wilt should be the whole of the law. Welcome to Thelema, Coast to Coast. My name is John Crow, and I'm the host of the show. Before getting into the show, I'd like to remind everybody there are multiple ways to contact the podcast. The easiest is via email at podcast@thelemacoasttocoast.com or at the website www.thelemacoasttocoast.com. There's also a voicemail of 206-600-5782, and then the postal address is Thelema, Coast to Coast, care of John Crow, P.O. Box 7045, Marietta, Georgia, 30065, and that's in the United States. Now, in the last podcast, I really emphasized the fact that I wanted to get lots of voicemails, and I also noticed a precipitous drop in the emails. So please don't interpret the fact that I want voicemails as to mean I don't like emails. That's not true at all. If you don't want to leave a voicemail, still send a message. I love getting the feedback. It's what keeps me going and lets me know what you all think. So send the feedback one way or the other on the web forum, via email, on the website, or voicemail. However you get it to me, please send it along. Also, there is the Frapper map that is on the Thelema Coast to Coast website. That's got hundreds and hundreds of people, and that is showing where a lot of the listeners are on. And we have listeners on basically every continent and dozens of countries. So I think that's fantastic. Thanks for everybody who listens and has gone to the Frapper map. And if you haven't, please go to the Thelema Coast to Coast website and click on the Frapper map and add yourself to it, because I love seeing where everyone's from. Lastly, I do have a MySpace page at www.myspace.com/Thelema Coast to Coast, and that's for those who are interested in connecting with the Thelema Coast to Coast site on the MySpace environment. So far, there's like 1,500 users, and there's always room for more. So feel free to go over and friend the Thelema Coast to Coast MySpace page, and I'll friend you back. Now, a recent project that I've started is a new Thelemic mailing list, or not so much a mailing list, an announcement list called HRILIU. And this is a free mailing list that will go out once or twice a month with announcements about books, events, music, and other items of interest for the Thelemic community. And you can sign up for that at www.thelema.nu/HRILIU. And that mailing list is really, it's an opt-in situation, and it's through professional service, so your emails are not going to be sold or anything like that. And what I want to do is I just kind of want to make a more active way for people to know about what's going on, whether it be interviews on the podcast or new books coming out, new CDs coming out, events happening, things like on the last podcast, talk to Nicole Klagsbrun about the Cameron art exhibit that she's doing. So I would be announcing things like that. And I'm also really interested in knowing what's going on. I'm plugged into a number of sources of information, but I'm certainly not plugged into them all. And so if your organization is doing an event, or you know of a new book that's come out, or want to spotlight an event or some music, a new CD, or something that would be of interest to the Thelemic community, feel free to send me an email letting me know about it. And I'll check it out and possibly include it on the mailing. So again, that is at www.thelema.nu/HRILIU, and I will have a link to the show notes. So the first issue of HRILIU will be going out a few days after this podcast is released. So please stop over there and add yourself to the list. All right, so now we're going to do some listener feedback. The first is a voicemail from Clinton, and he's got some comments about the previous podcast.
Hey, John, my name is Clinton. I'm calling from Baltimore, Maryland, and I would just like to say that I really enjoy your talks with Roger Williamson, and I went as far as to buy his Black Book of the Jackal, and I really liked it and have recommended it to a couple of friends. And in the last episode, you mentioned something about trying to acquire the Book of the Law in other languages. In a few days, I'll be heading over to Finland, and I think I'll try and pick you and I both up a copy there. And I'd just like to thank you for having such an excellent podcast. And 93.
Thanks very much for sending in the voicemail, Clinton. And I'm glad that the interview with Roger Williamson attracted you to go purchase his books, and that they were really interesting for you. I've really liked some of the stuff that Roger's doing. I like the way he's using fiction and short stories to present ideas. It's a little different than much of the nonfiction that is out there in the occult community. And also, yes, I'm very interested in a Finnish Liber All. That is one of the international languages that I do not have of Liber All. So please, once you have some details on that, let me know. All right, now we're going to go and do some emails from listeners. The first is from Steve. He says, Care John, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. I've been listening to your podcast for a few months now, and am slowly making my way through all of the episodes. I haven't made it through all of them yet, however, so please forgive my ignorance if you've answered this question on a previous show. My question is, who is this Keith 418, and why is he on every show? Why should I care about his opinions on magic, the OTO, or anything else for that matter, when I don't even know who he is? To me, he's just another guy on the internet with an anonymous name and lots of opinions. Thanks for taking the time to answer this question. Love is the law, love under will. Steve in Oregon. Well, Steve, Keith 418 is a friend of mine and someone who's been practicing magic and in occultism for well over 20 years. He's got a lot of experience in a variety of areas in occultism, and I find his opinions interesting and informative, and so that's one of the reasons I have him on the show. There's not a lot of people out there who can articulate themselves as well as he can, nor have as strong of opinions or have the broad understanding that he does. I'm certainly interested in talking to other people who have such backgrounds, but so far I really haven't found that many people who can really step up to the plate and do what he can. So that's one of the reasons he's on there, and also it's kind of fun to have him on. It's kind of like a I don't know if you listen to NPR, but there's a psychology show called The Infinite Mind, and at the end there's this guy named John Hockenberry who does kind of his commentaries and talks about what's going on that particular episode. And in some ways I kind of see Keith 418 as kind of a John Hockenberry type situation. So that's why he's on every show, or almost every show. There are actually a number that he's not on, but he will be on this show. And so I'm really interested in hearing from other people, but so far I have not run across many people who can articulate themselves as well as he can. And as far as why you should care, maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't. That's completely up to you. If what he says makes absolutely no sense to you and he sounds like a raving idiot, well then feel free to ignore him. But if what he says makes sense and has some applicability to your life and or your practice, well then take a listen. It's completely up to you. We can't make anybody listen or take any advice or anything. That's totally for you to decide. You are the total arbiter of your understanding. So, take him for what he is. Take it with a grain of salt. And if he doesn't make any sense to you, feel free to dismiss him. All right. The next email is from a listener named Justin. He writes, Hello, John. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. First off, I wanted to tell you how much I, and I'm sure the whole of the occult community, truly appreciate your show and the effort that goes into producing it. I have been studying and practicing magic for 6 months now and have continually come upon the dispute within the magic Thelemic community as to Israel Regardi's importance in relation to Crowleyanity and magic altogether. I recall Keith 418 using the word butchered when describing Regardi's editing of Magic Without Tears. Is it merely the century-old Golden Dawn feud that clouds people's feelings, or is there actually substance to these remarks? Here's possibly a show idea. Israel regarding the relation to Aleister Crowley and the history before and after Crowley's death. Keep up the excellent work. Loves the law, love under will. 93, Justin. Well, thanks for the suggestion. I'll keep that in mind. I happen to agree with Keith 418 about Rigardi's editing of Magic Without Tears. It really is a butchering job. I have an original first edition with Magic Without Tears, and there is a significant amount of material that has been removed from it. And unfortunately, there has been no edition since the original publication that has all of the material in an unexpurgated version. So the only way to get it right now is either buy a first edition for hundreds, if not over $1,000, or go to a very error-full version on the website hermetic.com. Although that's better than nothing. As for the Rigardi Crowley, Rigardi had a lot of issues with Crowley. They had a falling out, and Rigardi had his stance on certain things about Crowley and or magic. In the last podcast, I had David Shoemaker reply about some of the Jungian ideas of seeing certain aspects of magic as psychological and so forth. And a lot of that does come from Rigardi and his interpretation of magic. And then Crowley, had some other interpretations about things. And so there are some disagreements about approaches, and there's probably also some personal animosity between Rigardi and Crowley, based on their relationship falling apart. So I don't think it's a Golden Dawn / OTO thing. I think it's a lot more complex than that. I would encourage you to go check out the Magic Without Tears online and read Rigardi's biography of Crowley, as well as some of the other biographies that are out there, and kind of get a take of what Rigardi's stance on Crowley is and some of the other people, and then kind of make up your mind from there. So thanks for sending in the email, Justin. All right, the next one is from a listener named Odin. He's writing in regard to podcast 36, where we were talking about comic books. 93, John. First off, I'm a new listener to the podcast and love it. You're doing a great job, and now have one more religious listener. Haha. I was listening to podcast 36, and you talked to Christopher Knowles about a book he's working on about the connection between comic books and the occult. You mentioned Alan Moore and Grant Morrison, two of my favorite authors. However, your guest didn't mention specific places to start with these authors if listeners would be interested in reading some occult-related comics. The best place to start would be Alan Moore's Promethea, which he has described as a thinly veiled lesson in magic. The 31 issues in the series includes an issue explaining major arcana of the tarot, and a series of 11 issues, which one devoted to explanation of the Sephiroth of the Tree of Life. It is a great series that also has some of the best art I've ever seen in a comic. Again, I love your show and keep up the great work. 93. Well, thank you very much, Odin. I appreciate you sending that in and letting us know. I can't say I'm very plugged into the comic books market, so this kind of suggestion is very useful. So thanks for sending that in, and I hope that's useful to the listeners. The last email is from a listener named Larry. He seems to have gone back to some of the older podcasts, in particular to the one that was done as an experiment I did where I was releasing the podcast as audio and or video, and I released the podcast as a Windows Media video file. And of course that is pretty much for Windows only, and so there's not a lot of options for Mac. But Larry emails in saying, listening to an older cast, and just to let you know that Flip for Mac lets you watch Windows Media files on OS X, so that should help your enhanced podcast. Cheers, Larry. So thanks for sending that in, Larry. And for those Mac OS X users, if you go and get Flip, you can download the Windows Media version of an older podcast. I forget what number it is off the top of my head, but it was a discussion by Richard Kaczynski talking about the magical evolution of Aleister Crowley. So, very informative talk, and I encourage people to go check it out. And again, Larry, thanks for sending in that note. Okay.